Okay, hello everyone. I'm Virginia Clinton Lassell. I'm an assistant professor at the University of North Dakota, and I'm going to be presenting on some data analysis I did of the MOST initiative. I'll let MJ introduce herself.
Hi, MJ Bishop. I'm Associate Vice Chancellor and Director of the Kirwan Center for Academic Innovation at the University System of Maryland. And we were thrilled to have Virginia do this analysis of a project that we've had underway now, gosh, for about 5 years. So thank you, Virginia. I'm excited about your presentation.
You're welcome. It was quite the adventure exploring a very rich data set, as I'll go into. So a little bit of background on what do we already know about OER efficacy. So how effective are these open educational resources we've been talking and learning about this week for learning outcomes? We know that overall, there's similar learning performance when you look at open educational resources and compare them to courses that use commercial resources. Where you do see a benefit is with withdrawal rate, in which students who are enrolled in courses with open educational resources have lower withdrawal rates than students enrolled in courses with commercial resources. My apologies, I have children, so I did have to check my phone quick there. One thing that has less evidence, but is a promising area for the benefits of OER is credit enrollment intensity. In other words, how many credits is a student enrolled in a given semester? There have been 2 studies that have shown that when students have a course with an OER, they enroll in more credits, presumably because they can afford it. They have the financial resources to do so because those aren't resources that are going towards commercial resources. However, especially with the learning outcomes analyses and with withdrawal rate, where we see a lot of studies conducted and these aggregated studies done to look at the overall effect, we see a lot of variability. So if you want to think of variability as, this nice little bell curve, the one in the red means that pretty much all the findings are similar. However, what we're seeing is that it's more like this green down here, where we have some studies that show a benefit of OER and some studies that show a negative effect, and then some studies in the middle, but we don't really know why and for whom and under what circumstances those effects might be caused. We do have a couple studies that have looked at student factors in this variability. Culver did a very interesting analysis looking at student socioeconomic status using Pell Grant eligibility as a proxy, and found that students who were lower SES had more of a benefit of OER than other students. And Amy Nussbaum and colleagues also examined this with minoritized individuals as well as students with first generation status. She didn't find a benefit for students in these particular groups, but she did find that students in these groups disproportionately reported more negative behaviors, such as being more likely to withdraw from a course because they couldn't afford the textbook. So the purpose of this study is to look at this variability, to figure out why is this distribution so wide. And we did this by looking at one student factor and one course factor, because we can't look at everything all the time. The course factor we looked at was course modality. In other words, is the course online or face-to-face? We all know that online course enrollment has been steadily increasing, and with the quarantine and pandemic, it's skyrocketing. We also know that compared to face-to-face courses, student learning in terms of grades are fairly similar, but we do see a higher withdrawal rate in online courses and in online degree programs compared to face-to-face courses and degree programs. Also, there's evidence that Carrie Cutler has found that students enrolled in online courses read their books more, they use their materials more, regardless of whether those materials are commercial or OER, than their peers in face-to-face courses. This would indicate that perhaps open educational resources where they can freely access these resources may be more effective because the resources are actually being used. So having that availability, then the students can then use them more, would be beneficial. So course modality was one factor to consider. Another factor we considered was student age. And we know that non-traditional student enrollment, and non-traditional is defined in many, many ways that we just can't identify from this data set. Non-traditional student enrollment is increasing, and older student enrollment, defined as students age 25 and older in an undergraduate program or course, is also increasing. We know that this population, by virtue of being older, oftentimes they're further along with their family responsibilities and work responsibilities than their younger peers. We know that students who are older are more likely to drop out of college and courses than their younger peers. We also know that students who are older than average are oftentimes lower socioeconomic status than their younger peers. In addition to considering student age and course modality separately, it's important to think about student age and course modality and how they interact. In other words, older students in face-to-face courses, older students in online courses, younger students face-to-face, younger students online. Reasons for this. Older students are more likely to take online courses than their younger peers. And older students are more likely to perform better in online courses than their younger peers, likely because you see more engagement in those courses. So we can see that not only that student age and course modality are an important factor in grades and withdrawal rates, but that interaction of the two is also critical. So that brings me to our research questions. The first one I have is, what are the interactions between student age, so typical or older than typical, course modality, online and face-to-face, and course materials, open or commercial, on course withdrawals? Question 2, what are the interactions between all of those things and course grades? And question 3, what are the interactions between those and the number of course credits enrolled in? So the data source to address these questions is from the Maryland Open Source Textbook Initiative. And in this very rich data set, we have over 9,000 grades or course withdrawals from 7 institutions. Because students aren't charged for drops and drops are so early in the process and have less of an effect on grades, students dropping classes was not included in the analyses. Only courses in which there were sections with an OER and sections with commercial were compared to give a little more of an apples to apples comparison. So we're not comparing intro to business with intro to chemistry. And I used multi-level modeling. And if you're interested, we can geek out and talk about R code later. I can tell you all about what I've learned about LME4. But I do want to share that the student ID was nested within the institution because students could take more than one course. And I also controlled for gender, the discipline in terms of whether the course was a STEM or non-STEM, the minoritized status of the student, so whether or not they were white or a person of color, and the course level. So research question 1, course withdrawals. The analyses really revealed that there was no effect of open educational resources. There was also not an effect of student age. There was not an effect of course modality. There were no interactions. Nothing happened. I was baffled by this because in the literature, all of those factors have before shown an effect on course withdrawal. So why is it that, you know, my meta-analysis of 70,000 students found this very robust effect, and there's a long history of literature looking at student age and course modality, finding these effects, but they didn't seem to be in this data set. Well, I did some digging, and I think a big reason was the overall withdrawal rate for these students was quite low. It was a little over 6%. That's about half what you see elsewhere. So this speaks really well to Maryland University system that their course withdrawal, yes, that their course withdrawal rate was so low. And if you know statistics, you know about the curse of floor effects, where if scores tend to be very low or data points tend to be few, it's really hard to detect an effect, even if you have over 9,000 data points. On to grades. Overall, there was a positive effect of OER, which was a little surprising, to be honest, given the preponderance of evidence show equivalent outcomes. However, when I looked at interactions, there was an interaction between student age and OER. I thought, aha, see, this is where I'm going to find that those older students benefited from OER, right? So I did my follow-up analyses and I was wrong. In fact, I found that typically aged students, the younger students, when they had an OER, their grades improved. But there wasn't any difference. There wasn't any hint of a difference with students older than typical age. And there was no sign of any kind of interaction with whether the course was online or face-to-face. So why might that be? Well, this is opposite what I expected based on previous findings that students who are older have more responsibilities and lower socioeconomic status, so would benefit from the financial cost reduction of OER. However, older students have the advantage of with life comes maturity usually and having better budgeting skills. So there is evidence that when students are older, they make a point of budgeting for textbooks when they set up their finances for the year. And they're also more likely to think of their learning supplies as educational resources, as investments, as something that they plan on keeping and using. So they may, want to have that textbook to hold on to for future courses. I do want to point out, though, that even though the grades were not improved by students who were older than typical average, the cost savings of OER spares students financial stress, all students financial stress, and the cost of time. Stacy Katz did a great analysis showing all of the time that students put in to trying to save money on their books, that we can save them with OER. On to credits enrolled. I apologize for this, but this was where I had some really interesting numbers pop up. So I'm going to walk you through this table. For OER, the beta is positive and significant, meaning that if a student is in a course with an OER, they take more credits overall. Student age is negative, which means the older a student is, the fewer credits they enroll in. Not surprising, we already have some evidence for that. Typically, older students are juggling more responsibilities and more likely to go part-time. Course modality. Students who are online, which was indicated by 1, so negative would be a face-to-face. Students who are online are more likely to take fewer credits. Face-to-face, more credits. Where this got interesting, though, is if you skip down here, there's an interaction between open educational resources, student age, and course modality. That goes into those 4 groups I talked about: younger students face-to-face, older students face-to-face, younger students online, older students online. So I followed up with breaking that all down and looking at it. And I found that there was one group, and only one group, where there was a significant effect. Typically, older than typically aged students, so our older students in this data set, in face-to-face classes, took more credits if they had an OER in at least one course. So why only older students face-to-face? Well, the reason why you would see a benefit of OER is intuitive. The money that is saved can be reinvested into their education. They can afford financially to take more courses. There's also evidence that older students are more graduation oriented. They're more looking at the utility of their college education as opposed to the college experience. The younger students are more likely to report valuing the college experience and may not want to take extra classes because that would take away from the college experience. And online students a lot of times report that the reason why they are taking courses online is because of time constraints, that just even not having to commute to classes is a big time savings. And that's time that they can spend with their work, with their family, with their courses. So it could be that even if they had plenty of money for more courses, they simply do not have the time. Oops. So the take-home points from this presentation is that we found variable results on variation. In other words, there isn't one clear-cut group of students or type of course that clearly benefits from OER in terms of withdrawals, grades, or enrollment intensity. And I do want to bring this up because a lot of times as we go into the richness that is open pedagogy and all of its affordances, that don't forget that just saving students money right there is a good thing. And this shows that as on top of already existing evidence, that OER can reduce the financial burden of a college education, and you don't see negative effects. We did not see negative effects for any of the dependent variables, withdrawals, grades, or enrollment intensity for any of the groups. We did see a benefit of grades for typically aged students, and we did see a benefit of enrollment intensity for face-to-face students older than typically aged. All right, I thank you for your attention, and I am available for questions. I also want to highlight my Twitter handle there and email in case if you need to run, but you have questions for me.
Just real quickly, and boy, 20 minutes went fast. You had a couple of interesting comments in the chat, which is some alternative hypotheses maybe you want to take a look at. But Shugan, I'm going to butcher your first name, Hong, asked the question, did you separate between synchronous and online and asynchronous online? And I'm quite sure you didn't, because we would not have had that data to provide you. Yep. Yeah,
no, and with the data set that thick, and in order to do the cleanest analyses, if it had any face-to-face component, it was counted as a face-to-face course, because I do know in other literature, you see that courses where, say, they have one class online and one class face-to-face, like one class meeting online, one class face-to-face, you see that the outcomes are pretty similar as entirely face-to-face course.
And Jonathan Poritz asked, when the data was collected, when was the data collected in particular? Did it aggregate data both during and before COVID-19? That's another one I can answer. This was all pre-COVID-19. This was all
pre-COVID, yeah. And honestly, COVID is such a confound that I'm glad it was pre-COVID, because I don't think we could really do comparable analyses, because a lot of these were one semester, they were commercial, and then the next they weren't, or different instructors and such. So
Veronica Howard has asked, could you show the results slide just one more time?
Which one? Do any of these courses report using open pedagogy? Not that I know of.
Yeah, we're actually working on that as a follow-up study right now in Maryland to see what the implementations have been like. We are a little suspicious that we're seeing an awful lot of what we're calling textbook swapping instead of real changes to instructional design as a result of the OER adoptions. Brenda, you like that textbook swapping?
No, I was laughing at Veronica's too long didn't read. Veronica doesn't do stats slide.
Oh, okay. I like that. Publishing data anywhere? Virginia, you're working on a presentation.
Yes, I am trying to. It is currently under review. I'm going to give them a nudge next week. Right now, I have an unrelated project that I have invited revisions. So once that's done, I'm going to check in with the editor because it has been 4.5 months. So
yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Of course, with COVID, that's tough.
Yes. Yeah. Based on my review requests, journals are getting a lot more submissions than usual, but a lot fewer people agreeing to review.
Mm-hmm.
Which, got to call out my fellow researchers. That's pretty greedy. If you're going to be submitting, you should be reviewing.
Yep. So I realized we have a couple more minutes. I thought we were ending at 1:20. So there were a couple of comments earlier on about could the type of course also have contributed, if it was science versus math versus English and so forth. Kayla Reed also noted younger students may or may not have home support. If they're working through college, it is probably at minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, lots of variables here that also could be contributing to some of our findings.
Yes, and I want to really emphasize that we have a lot of data, but the data points themselves are quite shallow. So this is a very rich data set in terms of the number of data points, but it by no means captures the complexity of these constructs. So, and the thing about LME4 works best with a binary. And I realize a lot of constructs just don't work with a binary. And I force them into a binary because that's what cruel, horrible statisticians do. And so I did things like for discipline, it's STEM, non-STEM. Even though I realize English is different from psychology, which is different from business and marketing, etc.
Jonathan Ports has asked if we would share these slides. I suspect there is a place we can do that, correct?
Yes, let me check. I think my pictures are not licensed, so I need to take them out. And I did little updates up until the time of the presentation. I do have a summary, like a text summary of these findings posted that is available and citable with the citation.
Oh, Brenda, you're on mute.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that our session time has ended. So I'd like to thank both of our presenters for today. I'm going to stop the recording right now, but you can please stay on for another 15 minutes and continue the conversation.